The women in my life prayed I wouldn't become them. They also prayed I wouldn't become the men who lied for a living. But they never stopped the men from making sure I did. Prayer is powerful, but prayer without interruption? Sometimes that's just surrender with better branding. I grew up surrounded by women who believed in God with their whole chest. Rosaries in purses, Bible verses on refrigerators, prayer chains faster than the internet. These were not weak women. These were survival women. And they loved me fiercely. But they were also terrified that I was going to turn out exactly like them, or exactly like the men who lied. Welcome back to Morally Ambiguous. I was raised by men who lied for a living and women who prayed I wouldn't become them. And this episode is about those women. For a long time, I thought I didn't relate to them at all. I didn't want to be a lady. I didn't want to suffer quietly. I didn't want to stay when things were broken. I didn't want to pray problems away while chaos was happening in the next room. I loved them, but I didn't understand them. Not until I got older. Not until I realized prayer was sometimes the only power they thought they had. The women in my life had their own version of survival. My mom, young, lost, doing her very best. She loved to dance, loved life, then she found Jesus. And swung the pendulum the other direction. Church more than any sane person should attend, in my opinion. Faith became structure. Faith became safety. But it also became avoidance. And I say that gently, because trauma does that to people. When you've lived chaos, certainty feels holy. My Nina? Oh, Nina. Nina was information control. Vodka-powered truth sessions. 2 little nose powders by the sink, if you know, you know. She told me everything, way too much, at way too young of an age. At the time, I felt special, like I was trusted, like I was chosen. As an adult, I realized I was also carrying weight that wasn't mine. But she loved me. Deeply. Then there's my Tia. My person. The coolest woman in the world in my child eyes. Beautiful. Athletic. Former stripper. Money sometimes, chaos always, addiction like a shadow that never quite left her. When I was with her, it was an adventure, excitement, unpredictability, and I didn't realize until much later that I was often the adult in the room, even when I was tiny. And then there was Nana. Nana was different. Nana prayed, but Nana also confronted. She criticized, she protected. She put structure around me when she could. But she didn't preserve myths about men. She called things what they were. And that made her the revolutionary in my family. As a kid, I thought the women were weak because the men were loud power, direct power, action power. The women, they prayed. They gossiped a little, or a lot. They endured. They stayed. But adulthood gave me a different lens. Maybe prayer wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only form of control they were allowed. Many women in that generation were taught, don't confront men, don't leave marriages, don't embarrass the family, don't disrupt the structure. So they negotiated with God, instead of negotiating with reality. And sometimes that worked. Faith can move mountains. But sometimes, faith became the place they hid, because action was more dangerous than hope. I didn't want to be like them. I rejected being a lady. I rejected silent suffering. I learned to fight. Literally. My mom always had my back when it came to defending myself. I was tall for my age, 2nd grade looking like middle school. Kids wanted to fight me constantly. And my mom, she taught me how to handle it. How to stand my ground, how to protect myself. That was love. Real love. But emotionally, I gravitated towards the men. Because the men were direct. Even when they were wrong, they were clear. The women felt confusing, indirect, emotional currents under the surface, and I didn't understand that language yet. I honestly still don't fully. So I became my own protection. They prayed for me, but I became the answer. There's a story I heard growing up about a man trapped in a flood. Water rising, house filling. He climbs onto his roof and starts praying. God, please save me. A truck comes. Driver says, "Hurry, get in, the roads are flooding." The man says, "No, my Lord will save me. God is coming." The water keeps rising. A boat comes. "Get in, get in." "No," the man says. "God will save me. My Savior is coming." Now the water's almost over his head. A helicopter comes down. The ladder drops, and he waves them off. "God will save me." And the man drowns. When he gets to heaven, he says, "God, why did you abandon me?" And God says, "I sent you a truck, a boat, and a helicopter. What more did you want?" I think about that story when I think about the women in my life. Because they prayed. Oh, they prayed. But sometimes the answer to their prayers was leaving. It was confrontation. It was boundaries. It was therapy. It was saying no more. And those answers felt scarier than the flood. The women in my life were not weak. They were negotiating with systems they did not build. Some negotiated with grace. Some negotiated with vodka. Some negotiated with gossip. One negotiated with revolution. They prayed I wouldn't become them. But what they didn't realize is I didn't reject them. I rejected their survival strategy because I had different tools, different awareness, different timing. And the truth is, I carry pieces of them all. Their strength, their fear, their loyalty, their chaos, their love. Here's the part people don't talk about enough. Women's coping strategies shape men too. When women stay silent, men stay unchallenged. When women pray instead of intervene, men don't get help. When families protect myths, men don't heal. The men in my life weren't just products of their own trauma. They were products of systems where nobody knew how to interrupt the cycle. The men in my life weren't just products of their own trauma. They were products of systems where nobody knew how to interrupt the cycle. And that's not blame. That's reality. Also, let's be honest. If prayer alone fixed families, Latino households would be flawless. We had novenas, candles, holy water, saints, prayer chains, and still, someone's uncle was fighting in the driveway. So clearly God was like, I need you all to participate. If you grew up around women like mine, you know. They love hard. They sacrificed constantly. They carried fear quietly, and they did the best they knew how to do. Prayer is powerful. Faith is powerful. But action is holy too. Sometimes the miracle isn't what God does. It's what you decide to do next. The women who prayed I wouldn't become them, and in some ways, I didn't. But in the ways that matter the most, I did. Because I love fiercely. I protect my people. And I survived. Stay savage, stay soft, and remember, not all prayers are meant to be waited on. Some are meant to be walked into. I'll see you next episode. This has been Morally Ambiguous. Real talk for the beautifully flawed.